Hello, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome. I'm very pleased to be joined by General Wesley Clark. As most of you know, General Wesley Clark has served for over 30 years and nearly 40 years in the US Army. He was a former Supreme Commander of NATO, was involved in the Dayton Peace process after the Bosnian War, and was a four-star general, obviously, and has also then been heavily involved in the energy industry. You're a Rhodes Scholar and have a list of honors that are far too many to mention, not least serving in Vietnam and having a Purple Heart. So welcome, General. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
You're going to be speaking next week now in World Hydrogen North America Congress. Hydrogen is obviously a fast-growing energy vector. The ability of renewable energy to create renewable hydrogen is leading to a huge boom, not only in the US, but all around the world. And potentially we could see a new era in energy. Energy has always been seen as power. So I was curious around your views around this area. I guess the geopolitics of energy. Can we potentially, hopefully, look to be going to an epoch where there's less cause for wars, certainly in terms of resources, or is that real naive thinking given what's happening here in Europe? Speaking to you from Italy, not too far from Ukraine, so yeah, there's a lot there, but I'd be very, very curious on your thoughts on this area.
We're still in the age of hydrocarbons. And we can't afford to be in the age of hydrocarbons. For 30 years, the UN IPCC has been warning the world that we're raising temperatures. We used to call it global warming. We call it climate change. Whatever you say, the fact is the climate's changing. It's caused by human activities. So we can't keep going like we're going. And we've been in the age of hydrocarbons really since the beginning of the industrial age in the 18th century, but especially since Britain put its naval vessels on petroleum early in the 20th century. Oil has been the cause of struggle, conflict. World War II was about oil. World War I was even about oil at that point. And so if you look at Ukraine today and the use of the oil and gas as a weapon by Russia and European responses, we've got to move past the age of hydrocarbons, or at least the age of fossilized fuels. So that's why hydrogen is so appealing to us. We've got to do it quickly.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with you. And in terms of the seriousness of the situation, we've certainly been surprised, obviously, by the Ukraine war sitting here in Europe. Clearly, Germany have been hugely surprised, given their very long-standing relationship with the Russians that they had hoped would lead to peace in Europe. How serious is the situation from your standpoint in terms of Russia? We're obviously recording this in May 2023. Everyone's waiting for this sort of counteroffensive. Is Putin backed into a corner? Could we see retaliatory reactions that could be quite dangerous? And overall, is in this era with hydrogen coming and with potential these instability occurring with the sort of current system of power and also potentially looking at Asia and other issues.
Well, some people believe that the ultimate solution of this is that Putin will lose power. And so there are indications of difficulties in Moscow, and there's rivalries and so forth. And I think the Western media inflates this out of misplaced hope. I suspect Mr. Putin's quite firmly in position. And if you oppose him, you're liable to take a quick jump out of a 15-story window.
Yeah.
So many have. So I think you have to look at this as a continuing situation. Ukraine can't stop fighting. If they do, there won't be a Ukraine. Putin doesn't have the wherewithal right now to conquer Ukraine. But as the war goes on, he will certainly attempt to build up his forces. He'll go through the sanctions. He'll drag China in more directly, maybe get assistance from North Korea. Certainly he's getting help from Iran. And much of the world is standing aside and looking at this and saying, well, let's see what's going to happen. think the United States and Europe are firmly committed to Ukraine, but not necessarily at the risk of the destruction of Mr. Putin and chaos in Russia. So there'll be a lot of balancing acts in the months and a year or two to come. This is not likely to be over. War's always surprising, so you can't really predict it.
Mm-hmm.
There are signs the Russian forces are weakening, but Mr. Putin's put a call for another 400,000 draft. The Ukrainians are certainly getting tired of fighting, but they're determined to take back their land. So it looks like a stalemate, but it isn't, and it's very unstable, and it could go either way unexpectedly. Of course, our hopes are on this counteroffensive, but I think we have to be sensible and plan for it. This is going to be a long struggle.
Yeah, and in terms of the changing era, I mean, you've clearly been involved in this area. You've seen a lot of different situations in the end of the Cold War. And what is your viewpoint? Is this a new era in geopolitics? And what should we be doing about it in terms of here in Europe? We should be making sure we don't develop our own energy resources as fast as possible. And in terms of defense, we've seen maybe a need now for greater spending, certainly in terms of defense in Europe by European countries. What are your thoughts there?
Well, in the West, we're sort of victims of our own successes. We bemoaned poverty in the third world, including China and Africa and South Asia for 60 years after World War II. And we did our best to help these countries. Now they're coming through it. China wants its rightful place in the world. And it's prepared to use its influence, its power, and perhaps its military to get what it wants. So it does have nuclear weapons. It is rapidly modernizing its armed forces. It does have potential superiority in the vicinity of Taiwan. And we can't rule out military action by China to seize Taiwan. It's no longer a single superpower in the world. We simply have to recognize it is an era of multipolarity. Russia, of course, is a country with a very small GDP in comparison, about the size of Italy, let's say, but it does have nuclear weapons. And it's an autocracy. Mr. Putin controls it, so it's, in that respect, somewhat unpredictable and difficult. So, yes, it's an era of multipolarity. And the only way through this is that the democracies have to pull together. So this is a struggle, really, of democratic principles against market forces. Market forces, as we saw, drew Germany to be reliant on Russian energy, and Germany also to be reliant on the Chinese market, and reliant on the United States, ultimately, for its security. Well, that equation doesn't hold in the 2020s. So Europe has to come together with the United States. The United States has to recognize it is an Atlantic power first, before it's a Pacific power. We're not going to recreate NATO in the Pacific. That's simply not in the cards. So in order to manage the ascent of China, Europe and the United States have to work together to help assure that China plays by the rules. It's the WTO. No unfair trade practices, no more wolf warrior diplomacy, not using its enormous economy to bludgeon the supporters of human rights and democracies in their own countries. We just discovered in New York, and publicized at least, a Chinese police station is tracking down Chinese who speak out against their country. We don't allow that. Yeah. That's not the way we want the world to be. So in order to enforce and protect our own standards in our own countries, we have to work together. I know President Macron has made some confusing statements. I find them confusing because they don't really accord with French national interests. But France can't have an independent policy with respect to China. Not possible, because if it does, it'll be consumed by China. And I think everybody else in Europe is saying the right thing. United States has to do the right thing too. We have to be able to work more closely industrially with labor law, healthcare, the sort of full suite of things that go with industrial power. So we bring the West together to defend our values and principles. And that means industry leaders have to work together. It can't just be about going to the cheapest source of labor for manufacturing or seeking the most advantageous market conditions. Ultimately, whether it's Mercedes-Benz or Audi triumphing in China, that's not material really for the outcome of this enormous struggle of democracies to maintain their own principles and values in the world ahead.
That's very well put. Thanks a lot, General, for sharing those thoughts. They're very good to hear, and certainly we look forward to listening to you more at the World Hydrogen Congress and taking on board some of these messages. And hopefully, hydrogen is going to help us, enable and maintain, democracies. We look forward to seeing that happen. So, many thanks, General. We look forward to seeing you at the World Hydrogen Congress.
Thank you very much. See you on Monday.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.